Hello and welcome back to the A Traveling Knitter channel. My name is Steph and this is going to be a video about my suggestions or tips for traveling with knitting. A bit of background about me and why I feel like I can talk about this. I have been traveling by plane and by car for basically since I was born. I believe I hopped on a plane, I think when I was 6 months. So, and have been traveling ever since. I was a traveling software installer for 6.5 years, and that meant that I was either driving or flying to location every Monday or Sunday. And then I would drive or fly back every Friday/Saturday. So if you've been with the channel for a while, you'll know that background about me. I also have family in Germany and travel over to Europe every couple of years, and of course do other trips than that. So I thought that this is something that I have a lot of experience with, and just to give you my experience and what I've run into. So I have kind of 6 categories of tips that I will share with you. Before I get into the 6 kind of groupings, I will just mention some general tips that really deal with crafting and knitting in general. One, if you are someone who has a hard time concentrating, then maybe not bringing the most difficult thing on that you're knitting, maybe don't bring that. If you are concerned about taking up space, then maybe don't bring that very large sweater. If you're, understanding patterns can be a little bit difficult, read the pattern before you start your traveling, right? Do some of this prep work. For me, again, me personally, I am comfortable with bringing a sweater with me. I have done that before, no problem. I'm also typically pretty comfortable with knitting patterns, so I don't read through the knitting pattern. So I don't really do these things, but obviously if this is something that you prep when you're knitting in general, then of course you would do it when you're traveling. All right, so number 1, consolidate. A whole thing about traveling, especially when traveling by plane, is you have a limited amount of space. And I fall prey to this constantly. I love to read, so I'm always bringing books with me. I journal, I play video games. So I'm typically bringing my phone, my headphones, my Kindle, my iPad. I now have 2 iPads. So I didn't travel with both of them, but I did think about bringing both of my iPads. Do I need that? No. Did I want to bring it? Yes. I have a Switch, so I brought my Switch. And then of course, your wallet, if you're bringing any snacks, if you have a sweater and you're worried that you're going to be cold on the plane, pack a sweater, you don't wear it. You should always wear your sweater, then you got more space. So you're fitting a ton of stuff into your bags. So instead of like what I would normally do, which is have a project bag for each project, don't go that route. So typically what I will do, and it kind of just depends on what I'm doing while traveling, how many bags I want to bring. I will have one main project bag. And so this is still prepped from my last trip. I'll have one main project bag and I will put all of the projects together. So every single one of the projects that I had thought that I might want to knit was in this one project bag. And then I will bring a separate project bag, and I'm only going to be physically working on one thing at a time. And so I will shuffle them in and out. So I'll have one project bag that I actively work on, and then I will have another project bag where I will maintain all the projects. Again, all of them are just kind of laying in here. I didn't bring multiple project bags for each one of those. If you're traveling, there's no need. Optionally, you can have a bag dedicated to your knitting or your crafting. So I have done that before. I have traveled with this bag because it has 2 large pockets on the side, and then there are multiple pockets on the inside, and it is a flat bottom, and it zippers. That is key. Zippered top is key for your carry-on bags, in my opinion, because instead of my bag having to sit like this or sit and then squish down, I can put it on its side because it is zippered. Number 2, bring your main project bag, have it be collapsible. And the reason for this is just a minor annoyance that I have. And it is, if you are working out of this or working out of this, this is a bag. During takeoffs and landings, you cannot have this on your lap. You can have a child on your lap, but you cannot have this on your lap. So what I do, because I start knitting immediately upon getting onto that plane, is I have a couple bags that could basically collapse into nothing. So this is what I brought last time, and this is what I used as my main bag. There's no interfacing. It is just fabric. And so what I will do is, I'll just have it to the side or even have it on my lap, and it collapses. It is smaller than my phone. And so I have not had this be asked to be removed from my lap. I did have, let me go grab it, not this exact thing, but I had a purse that was this size. And it was on my lap, and I had a flight attendant tell me that it needed to be under the seat. And I was not in a good mood that day. And so I looked at her and looked at my neighbor who had his, I think he had his iPad out or something. And for taxi and takeoff, you're allowed to have your iPad out. His iPad was bigger because it was bulky. It was bigger than my purse. And I kind of looked at her, and she's like, it's a purse. It needs to go under the seat. So whatever. I literally took my phone out because that's all that was in that purse. I didn't even have my wallet in there. Took it out and then put it under the seat. But to me, it's because it was structured is why I had to put it under the seat, semantics. But again, I've never had an issue once I've switched to using something that's very clearly collapsible. Also, it looks like it's kind of like a pillow, and pillows are allowed to be on your lap. So that's just my other tip for you not having to put all your stuff away or have it all out during takeoffs and landings, is collapsible bag. Number 3 is to review the scissors that you have. This kind of scissor is not allowed. This kind of scissor, which is much sharper, much pointier, this is allowed because the blade of the scissors from I typically just look at it where it starts cutting, but I think really it's the pivot is 4 inches or 10 centimeters, less than that. I actually have, I think they're called diamond gems or gems, and it's like half this. So it's like, like 1 inch. It's tiny. That's what I typically travel with. They're also blunt. They're not sharp, which is what blunt means. And really what you do need to be aware of though with the scissors. So again, you're not allowed to bring them in if it's longer than 4 inches, but when you have TSA going through your bag and if you have scissors, so mine are protected like this, it's fine. If they are exposed like this, you need to tell them that there are scissors, because if they accidentally grab it and stab themselves, that is when they're going to take it away from you. have it covered, or if it's getting searched, tell them you have scissors so that they are aware not to just go digging around. I have also, so I've never had scissors taken away. I have also traveled with a seam ripper. So on a seam ripper, you've got like that point, and then in the inside there's that edge. I've traveled with a seam ripper. I've never had an issue with that either. And when I say like I have traveled with a seam ripper, I went an entire year with a seam ripper in my bag, and that went through probably 50 or 60 different TSA trips in different airports. So when I'm saying I've traveled with something, I'm not saying once, twice, 3 times, or 10 times. It's upwards of 30, 40, 50, 60 within a year. Also, that is within the United States. I have traveled with all of these, except for the seam ripper, into Europe as well as Australia, and have not had a problem. Topic 4 is needles. And this is honestly why I wanted to make this video. I hear often with people who don't travel as often, as frequently, that they are concerned that their knitting needles are going to be taken at TSA. And so they buy cheap knitting needles, wooden knitting needles, just so that they aren't upset when that time comes, or they'll bring scrap yarn so that they can keep the project. Not once have I ever had my knitting needles taken from me. That's in all airports that I've ever traveled, ever. I have been knitting since I was in middle school. I have been bringing projects with me since post 9/11, directly after 9/11. I have never had my knitting needles taken from me. I carry metal. I have the Addies, Chalgoos, what are the, I'm blanking on the names of the other knitting needles, but what I'm getting at is they're pointy. I have traveled with wooden needles before, and they broke. So that to me is the worst. Also, why would I want to knit on needles that I don't enjoy knitting? I'm on vacation. I should enjoy my vacation, and bad needles are going to be a detriment to that. So I just want to put it out there. You can travel with any knitting needle. What I used to do when I first started traveling full-time was on the TSA website, there was actually a page that said knitting needles are allowed. And there was even like a paragraph it was like, if you feel uncomfortable or you're worried, you can print this and provide it to the TSA agent. And so I did for about a year, keep this piece of paper with me in my briefcase. And so if I were ever to have a problem, I was just going to give them that piece of paper. Was it going to do anything? I don't know. But that was my game plan. Needless to say, not once did I have to pull it out. I have traveled with all my needles and have never had an issue, minus the wooden ones that were broken. I did notice an interesting thing in that when I had my metal needles in my checked luggage, my luggage would get searched. So it hasn't happened in many, many years because of COVID, right? Not a lot of traveling, but I would have my metal needles, and I would open up my suitcase, and there would be that long piece of paper that says your bag has been randomly checked. And I didn't get that if I didn't have the metal knitting needles in my checked bag. So that was kind of interesting, but again, Nothing's wrong with that. So there's no issue. I've never had an issue with the needles. I just really want to stress that if you're nervous, don't be nervous. My additional tip is don't bring double pointed needles on a plane. You drop one, it is really hard to bend over. I would say I'm an average size, and I fit just fine on plane seats. And the smaller the plane, the tighter it gets, the less room you have. And I typically would fly out of Dayton, and those have the CRJs. That's like, it's a 2 and 2, or no, I think the CRJs are the 1 and 2s. They're really skinny, and there is not a lot of space. It is very difficult to bend down and touch the floor or find your knitting needles. So my recommendation is circulars. Stick with circulars. I don't really knit on straight needles. I don't typically knit on double points other than doing a very small circumference at like the tip of a hat, tip of a sock. Otherwise, I'm circular all the way. And there are so many benefits to it, but specifically for traveling, it's bigger, right? There's more to it. If you drop it, there's more to grab. And when you're knitting on the go and you need to stop immediately, like let's say all of a sudden the flight attendant is there with food, or you need to get up because your seatmate needs to go to the bathroom, it's a lot easier to kind of stop on a circular needle. So, in my opinion, if the TSA still has the knitting needle, traveling with knitting needle notice, then I will put the link in my description box of how, like, directly to that. And a lot of my tips can be used across, the country, or across the world. But again, I am based in the United States, and the TSA is our governing, they're the group at the airport for the United States. I understand that it's not the same for everyone. So if you're in Australia, you probably could care less about the TSA notice that I will include, but it'll be there for all of my American viewers. Tip or group number 5 is stitch markers. I typically don't drop things very often. I'm not a very clumsy person, but the one thing that I have lost in an airplane are stitch markers. So I love stitch markers. I love seeing them on my projects. I use them so that I don't have to memorize patterns, or I don't have to do math. It's just like, I know what I'm doing when I see this thing. It helps you divide stuff, right? There are so many reasons to use stitch markers. And it's a big bummer when they fall to the ground and your stitch marker is maybe round and the airplane is probably not flying perfectly flat. It could roll somewhere. So what I recommend, and my tip, is use paper clips. There are so many paper clips out there in this world, and I'm sure you have some floating around. I'm sure you can find some somewhere. And I have a couple paper clips from college, and I got these at Staples. A whole bunch of these. They're adorable. They're still really cute for your projects, but I feel nothing if I lose them. So my recommendation when you're traveling is maybe swap out your stitch markers for paper clips. You can bend them to be whatever shape you want. You don't have to go get fancy paper clips. Just use whatever you have. But it'll save you some heartache if you drop your stitch marker and you cannot find it again on that plane. Stitch markers are considerably smaller than needles. My last group of recommendations or tips or whatever are around your pattern. I tend to print my patterns out. I like that because it gets me off of my phone. I find that if I'm using my phone for my pattern, I am noticing texts, I'm noticing notifications. I'm so much more likely to jump to doing something else other than reading my pattern and getting back to knitting. I also don't want to eat up my battery. This is not so much of a problem anymore because a lot of planes in the United States have outlets, and the bigger planes at least. And so it's not as big of a deal of running through my battery on my phone, but when I was traveling constantly 2013 through 2019, I was on planes that typically didn't have outlets. Dane's a small airport, we get small planes. So I wanted to conserve the battery of my phone. So another reason why I would always print out my pattern. And with the printed out pattern, some little tips with it. If it's multiple pages, I would bring a binder clip so you can keep all of your pages together. And you can like clip it to things. So depending on the style of plane that you're in, some of them will have pockets that are up top. So you can have your pattern sticking out of that pocket up top. Others have the tray table and the clip is like almost at face height. And so with that clip, you can actually take your pattern piece and kind of stick it under that clip, and then it's just there. So options with your patterns. Again, I prefer to print it. I feel like it's easier to use when on the go. You don't have to always fumble with your phone, get your phone out, or iPad. Like you don't have to pull your iPad out to have your pattern. Also always, or not always, but I do recommend sticky notes. I like to use sticky notes on my pattern, especially when I'm traveling, because I'm not knitting in large chunks of time until I'm on the actual plane. So there are those small sticky tabs. Those are really good to use. Or you can just use a normal Post-it note, move it around. Yeah, so those are really all of my tips while traveling. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you have additional tips or if any of these tips are especially helpful, be sure to let me know. That makes me really, really happy, and I'm sure everyone else would appreciate additional tips, tricks, guides. I'm not one for saying hacks because I don't think any of these are hacks. They're just suggestions and tips. And of course, if it was helpful, give it a thumbs up, give it a like. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. I post crafty content. I post bookish content. I do some vlogs. And of course, my Instagram, I kind of do all the same thing there. But thank you so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.